All right, so now we're going to talk about the Puritans, and they were, as you know from the last lecture, different from the Separatist. If you don't know what the difference is, you need to know. And even though I said it in the last lecture, I'll say it again. All right, they were both, um, you can say, Calvinist. All right, in other words, they followed our old buddy John Calvin that we talked about a few lectures ago. And so they were both Protestant. Now, strictly speaking, you can say that the Anglican Church is Protestant as well. But the Anglican Church is very, very, very similar to the Catholic Church, especially when it was first formed by Henry the Eighth. Henry the Eighth did not have an ideological difference. All right, he just wanted a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, and the Pope didn't want him to get a divorce because she was the aunt of Charles V, who was the king of Spain, who had a little, protection, um, or protected the Pope's interest and the Catholic Church's interest. So, it was like mafia, back then. Things, if we made progress, that's a matter of opinion. But let's get back to the Puritans and their story. All right, I'll have to do this again. Shoot. So the Puritans and the Separatists. So I kind of went on a little tangent there, but I want you to know the difference. Okay, so they were both Calvinist, which meant, like I said, they were what we would call, or what I would call, true Protestants, not like the Anglicans, who were, you can say they were Protestant, but they were a little bit, they were almost exactly the same as the Catholics. Now, this would change over the time. I mean, it would become a little bit different, but even today, it's very similar. Today, it's in the United States, we call it the Episcopal Church because during the American Revolution, people that belonged to the Anglican Church did not want to associate themselves with England. All right, so let's get back to the original point here, the difference between the Puritans and the Separatists. So they definitely um, did not like the Anglican Church because they said it was too much like the Catholics. And so the Separatists, this is easy to remember. I don't know why people miss it on the test. The Separatists wanted to separate from the Anglican Church completely. So they were a little bit more, you can say, radical than the Puritans. Okay? Now, what did the Puritans want to do? Now, what a lot of people think is that the Puritans, or called themselves Puritans because they didn't drink, they didn't smoke, all right, they didn't tell, dirty jokes. Um, this is not really why the Puritans are called Puritans. And furthermore, actually, they did a lot of these things. They did drink. All right, I'm sure some of them smoked. I'm sure some of them told bad jokes and all of that. And oftentimes the Puritans get like kind of a bad rap for being very intolerant. And actually, they were intolerant in today's standards. But back then, the Puritans were actually pretty progressive. All right, we may talk about that later on. But let's get back to the question: why were the Puritans called Puritans? Because they did not want to separate from the Anglican Church, but they wanted to purify the Anglican Church. All right. They wanted to purify the Anglican Church from two things. They wanted to purify it from corruption, all right, and they wanted to purify it from its, you could say, Catholic doctrines. Okay, and this is a biggie right here. All right, this was a biggie for them as well. All right, the Puritans felt that, as long as your society is corrupt, okay, then what's going to happen to your children? And there was a very strong, spiritual element in all of this. Okay, so if you um, fight corruption and you try to purify not only the church but society from corruption, this is a very important point, and it's going to kind of come together later on when we talk about the American Revolution. So when was the American Revolution? Okay, 1775, 1783. Okay, 76, of course, Declaration of Independence. So that's gonna, I want you to remember the goal, the objective, all right, of the Puritans was to purify the Anglican Church, but also society too. Okay. Now, they ended up, well, let's just kind of start from here. In 1629, now the King of England was Charles I. Now, throughout the 1600s, you had some real humdingers. Um, I don't know how to spell that, but that's just something my mom used to say. Anyway, you can ask her. She's from Oberlin. Anyway, so they used to have some real humdingers, and what I mean by that is, I mean it was kind of crazy throughout the 1600s in England. All right, 1600s England. All right, if you lived there, you would know why the Puritans wanted to purify it. And I mean, there was even a civil war. All right, in England, and that's why people didn't mind leaving England, going across the Atlantic Ocean. All right, to take their chances over there because things were so unpleasant, all right, so unpleasant in England, all right, that they didn't mind taking their chances. And so in 1629, Charles I issued a charter to the Massachusetts Bay Company. All right. Um, Now, in 1630, and actually, like this, when you talk about the Massachusetts Bay Company and all that, I mean, you don't have to worry about that too much. There's some other points I want to make sure that you understand. In 1630, there was really an armada of 7 ships. Now, this was, much larger group of people that came, 10 years later. All right, remember it was 1620 that the separatists came over. And it consisted of an armada of 7 ships, followed closely by another 10 ships. Now, a guy by the name, I mean, one of the things that you'll see historians emphasize is that there was this was a pretty educated uh, group of people. So this was not, maybe like what we talked about in Jamestown, where sure you had some aristocrats, but a lot of them were, very poor people from the cities that went. Overall, this was a pretty educated group. And there's a guy by the name of John Winthrop, who had resigned a powerful post in England to lead the expedition. Now, he went to Cambridge University in the 1600s, and he believed that the Church of England was still worth saving. So again, we go back. I mean, he was considered a Puritan. All right. But the thing is they wanted to purify, as I said, they wanted to purify the Anglican Church. But this was a huge dilemma, right? So here we are in what they considered the New World. Then you have England over here. Now, how would they be over here, and how would they purify, all right, the Anglican church if they were over there? Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, Winthrop had an answer to this, and he gave a sermon in academia. We might consider this almost like a lecture, a model of Christian charity, a model of Christian charity. And what did he say? Okay, what he said, all right, the way you somehow purify uh, England and its church was by example. And basically, he said the answer was to build a city upon a hill. I mean, just all you have to do is look up John Winthrop, and you could probably put the um, Google in a model of Christian charity, or you can Google in a city upon a hill, and you can get the whole. You might be able to get the whole sermon. Anyway, all right. He said that they needed to create a model community so glorious in its purity that England would have no choice but to admire and emulate it. Winthrop and the Puritans decided that the only way to save England was by leaving England. Let's get the heck out of there. And trust me, sometimes when I have time in my face-to-face class, sometimes here, I mean, it depends. I do a little lecture on England in the 1600s, and I kind of stopped doing it because it would take me really 2 class periods to get through it, and it would get us behind. But like I said, I mean, there was just a lot of turbulence in the 1600s. There was a lot of famine. There was war. I mean, it was pretty bad, and that's why people wanted to leave. So sure, they wanted to create this, but this wasn't things weren't that rosy in England. Trust me. Anyway, since all of their direct efforts at reform in England had failed, leaving such corruption, um, the corruption really, they, like I said, they feared for their children's souls, and so they figured they would launch kind of a flank attack against corruption. All right, so this is important. So, like I said, contrary to popular myth, the Puritans were not utopians. All right, they were not utopians, and so what is someone that is a utopian, or what is a utopia? Well, what is a utopia? You know that's like a perfect place, a perfect society. All right, nothing ever goes wrong. All right, everybody's happy and they help each other, and it's awesome. All right, so this is what's an example of utopia? Well, maybe I don't know, Eunice, for example. All right, may be considered a utopia. All right. Anyway, so they were not utopians. Indeed, as Calvinists, they considered doctrine so utopian as really being almost blasphemous, because man, when I say man, I mean that in the generic sense, or human beings are so depraved. They're so um, you know they are going to do, if left up to their own devices, they're going to do more often than not the bad thing. Okay, they're going to sin. All right, so this idea of some kind of utopia, forget it. Okay, Calvinism, taught that humans were, like I said, so depraved that they could not save themselves, much less create a perfect utopia. Okay, they merely sought, and this is important, to build a pure society, one that other people could emulate. All right. To show that their intent in immigration to the New World was to purify and not to renounce the Church of England, as the separatists did, they issued a statement before they sailed, avowing their affection for the church and denying that they were of those that dream of perfection in this world. Anyway, Massachusetts expanded rapidly despite many hardships because, we talked about all these ideas, but when you actually start, having to hunt and live off of the land and clear land and all that, well, sometimes you forget about these little ideas here. All right, but despite many hardships, the uh, within a decade of the colony's establishment, all right, an incredible 15 to 20,000 people had settled in New England. All right, so they got there in 1630. By 1640, all right, there was about uh, around 15 to 20,000. All right, let me see. I have some stats here between, you know, uh, let's see, by 1640, all right, there were 75,000 people. So by 1640, okay. So actually, let's see here, by 1630, okay. So really, I mean, at the beginning, between this period of time, 1630 and 1640, by 1650, I guess. Okay, so that makes sense. There were about 75,000. Okay, so anyway, I hope I didn't confuse you. I kind of didn't explain that very well. But the main thing I want you to realize is that the colony, quickly, much more so than Jamestown, much more so than the separatists. I mean, this colony in Massachusetts expanded rapidly. Okay. Now remember that the separatists were also in Massachusetts, so don't get confused. They were just in a different area. Okay. All right. So anyway, I hope that helps.